Hello guys, this is your favorite donkey mom, Sweater Pain, and here you are in what I'll call a rough draft of the episode between a Rockhoof and a hard place. So my overall thoughts on the episode was I think it is a very, very good episode, and it's honestly one of my favorites of the season so far, which, I don't think that it's going to get any better from this point in the series because we are unfortunately nearing towards the end of season 8, but I'm pretty confident in this episode. With weak episodes such as what I feel the previous Rainbow Dash and Rarity episode and Yakety Sax, it was nice to see an episode with a concrete purpose. Not necessarily a purpose to the plot, but a purpose to a certain character. While a friend in the end did serve a purpose to see why Rarity and Rainbow Dash were friends, I think that was more of a season 1 through 3 episode rather than an episode that should be taking place in season 8. And while Yakety Sax was, I don't really know what to say about Yakety Sax. It was a nothing burger, what I'll call it. It pretty much didn't have anything going for it, and it doesn't affect the continuity of the show in any way, which it doesn't really need to, but it provides no character development and actually regresses Pinky's character a lot. However, I can do feelings on those episodes another time, but we are talking about a Rockhoof and a hard place, and boy, did I actually love this episode. Not only did we get to see the pillars once again, but we got to see what the pillars are actually doing in this new modern world. And we even get a callback to Stygian. Stygian is now a famous author, or I'll say a motivational author, talking about his mental illness and his experience as being the pony of shadows. You see Somnambula as being this motivational speaker, this kind of mentor, this meditation guru of sorts, which it's not for everyone, obviously, as we see by Rockhoof, but she's helping ponies, and that's fantastic. She's not necessarily doing what she did in the old world, however, it's nice that these characters can adapt. Mage Meadowbrook is kind of doing the same thing that she's always done, however, in this new modern age, she's kind of, tweaked her recipes to fit a more modern Equestria, but she's had success and she's pretty much blossoming on her old house and her old business. The most interesting pillar was Flash Magnus being a drill sergeant. I don't know if anyone picked up on this, but I don't see how you couldn't have, but the new armors for the equestrian guards, I thought that was pretty interesting to see diverse types of armor, which we don't really have in our military, and by our military I mean the US. It's kind of one uniform, but it was nice to see that there was different types of diverse ponies and different types of armors in the Royal Army, and it was nice to see the dynamic between Rockhoof and Flash Magnus. And while Rockhoof is kind of envious that Flash Magnus has such an important role, he instead embraces his friend and says, "Wow, this is this really great opportunity, I'm glad you have this." Unfortunately for Rockhoof, while everyone was able to return to home, or what's left of their home, Rockhoof is prohibited from his home as it is being kind of preserved as a historical site, unfortunately. He's not even allowed to play with his own possessions. It's absolutely insane. But that's pretty much how the conflict of this story gets started. So the conflict starts, Rockhoof is unable to stay in his home, one because he is destructive and careless, but also because everything that he has owned and everything he has known is pretty much being preserved and being sent off to a museum away, which gets him pretty depressed. However, Twilight volunteers to allow him to teach in the school because he is one of the pillars, and she figures he has a vast array of knowledge, which I like what they did with him. They didn't portray him as stupid or incompetent, which is a very interesting thing. They didn't portray him as oh, he is this wise leader, but surprise, surprise, he's dorky. No. What they do with him is he has this knowledge and he has this life experience, however, his excitement and in the vigor of conversation, he is destroying walls, he's destroying tables and benches and doorways. It's just a mess. However, the kids do take nicely to him, which I appreciate, and I appreciate that he's not being written off as this destructive brute, that there are people who appreciate him, and the entire conflict could have been solved if he was maybe a little more careful and a little less careless, which, I mean, it's a easy problem to solve. However, it's just not his personality. I don't want to use the excuse, but he comes from a different time, a hardier time, mind you. He grew up near an active volcano where ponies actively had to fend for their lives each day, so it's understandable that he's a bit hardened, I'll say. But unfortunately, he can't stay in the school because he's causing property damage, so he has to leave the castle, unfortunately. And the main six try to get him positions in certain places. However, his destructive nature is just too much for anyone to handle, even to the point where he sinks a naval ship that is part of the hippogriffs. And while I like how everyone at the job he is applied to, or every job that he is kind of worked at, they appreciate his contribution. However, they are honest with him and being direct with him, like, we appreciate the work you're trying to do and we appreciate your effort. However, you can't do this because you are causing damage and you just don't have the set of skills for this position. And he takes it very maturely. However, this kind of thing weighs on him more and more every single rejection, and it kind of seems like what he was raised in has kind of disappeared. Like, for example, like I said with the pillars, Mage can still go back to her potions, Stygian can use his experience as a shadow to write books, Star Swirl is teaching and being taught at the same time. Like, every one of the other pillars has some sort of experience or some sort of skill that they can use in the outside pony world. However, what Rockhoof is known for is being a hero and this kind of great knightly soul, which would be necessary if we didn't have the main six in Starlight and Discord and all of these heroes in Equestria who, rather than solving their problems with brute strength and battle tactics, who more solve it with diplomacy and with tactic, which unfortunately is not what Rockhoof does. And it comes to the point where Rockhoof decides, I just have nothing I can contribute to the world. The other pillars have something they can contribute to the world, but I am simply, as he puts it, no one wants someone who can dig with a shovel. It's just not something anyone needs anymore. And this leads to a very interesting proposal by Rockhoof to say, can you please turn me to stone? And it's written in a very interesting way. It's kind of alluding to suicide in a way, because there was a very interesting in the comments of the episode I watched. There was a divide between people considering this, oh, he's trying to pretty much commit suicide, and other people like, it's not actually suicide because he's being turned to stone. It wouldn't be suicide if you wanted to be turned to stone for a few thousand years until they could find something for him to do. However, Rockhoof intends to stay as stone. He does not want to come out of being turned to stone. He simply wants to be turned to stone, put in a museum, and remembered for the hero he was and not for what he views as pathetic now, which I think is pretty much alluding to suicide. I'm not sure if the writers meant it that way, but that's how I took it, and that's how a lot of people took it, and I'm not criticizing the show for that. I think it's a very interesting way of bringing up the topic of suicide and feeling worthless and feeling like you have no purpose in this world, which a lot of people do. A lot of veterans feel this way. We're not in a war and we're not fighting anyone, so a lot of veterans feel like they have no purpose, which is why suicide rates in the veteran community are very high. Also, there's mental illness involved, but there also is that aspect of what I used to do and what I used to be known for is simply not around anymore, and I don't know what to do with myself. So that's pretty much what I felt from it, and that's pretty much what I took away from that. But it's a very interesting discussion to bring up in a kid's show, and I think it's the best way they could have brought it up with the censors and the circumstances they had. For example, the argument of mental illness was brought up with Do Princesses Dream of Magic Sheep, and Luna pretty much causing herself mental turmoil because of this horrible thing she did in the past. It's pretty much like that. They have to still get past the censors, they still have to keep it PG, however these are the topics they want to discuss for the adult audience that they know is watching. However, he involves Twilight in this, which I can imagine is a horrible and hard decision for Twilight to make. I mean, she has to choose between her principle of, I don't want to kill him, because it's presented as Twilight kind of killing Rockhoof. And I know they don't explicitly say it, but how she takes it and how she reacts to it, she's like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to kill him to satisfy him? She tries to convince him out of it, like, no, you still have so the world can offer, you still have stuff like this, but Rockhoof just isn't having. He's like, I don't have anything I could use in the modern world, I don't have any set of skills, I just don't know what I could possibly do with myself. And he's like, just turn me into stone, have everyone remember me as a hero, and just leave me there in a museum. However, Twilight pretty much looks for another way to figure this out, and while this is happening, she leaves Spike to teach her class. Spike is very exhausted because there's been a lot of discussion and back and forth throughout the night. He doesn't have a lot of sleep, and because of this, he's not, of course, mentally all there. Not in like a mentally deficient kind of way, but he's tired, he's letting stuff slip, he doesn't really have the filter he usually would have or the sensitivity of the situation, so he pretty much lets it slip to the students who honestly love Rockhoof. They really appreciate Rockhoof's style of teaching, minus the property damage, but they like the vigor and the excitement that he produces when he is doing his speeches, and they like Rockhoof's personality. However, Spike lets it slip that Rockhoof wants to turn himself to stone and pretty much remain stone forever, and the way the students react also is indicative that, oh my gosh, this is kind of alluding to suicide, because all of the students start running after Rockhoof, and Yona specifically, because Yona is Rockoof's #1 fan. They have very similar values, very similar cultural similarities, so she really feels at home with Rockhoof, and she basically writes Rockhoof this note, like, I don't want you to turn to stone. Ever since I've come to this place of ponies, I feel very left out because there's a cultural difference. Yaks are very tough and strong and brutish, however the ponies are much more subdued. However, you are a pony who has similar cultural ties to me, and I would be absolutely devastated if you would disappear away. And Rockhoof, with a little bit of convincing from Yona, pretty much says, I will tell this last story and then I will turn to stone. So he tells the story. Of course, everyone is embiggered, especially the children, and they pretty much beg him not to go, and Rockhoof suddenly realizes that he is a storyteller. He is able to be a storyteller and pass down these tales from these students, and he pretty much realizes that, oh my gosh, all this old world knowledge that I have, I could apply to the outside world, or at least have someone listen to it and brighten up their day like he did with Yona. And that's pretty much the entire plot of the episode. So overall, fantastic episode. Definitely would watch again, not just for the actual plot and because Rockhoof is hunky, but because I just love the themes that are presented and the situations that are actually presented within this episode. It's a fantastic episode, and it's definitely worth a rewatch in my opinion. I know it's not the kind of episode for everyone because it's kind of a nothing burger in terms of the plot, but I really like the character development that is shown here. Yona gets something out of it, Rockhoof gets something out of it. Twilight doesn't really develop in any kind of way. She's just faced with a very hard decision. However, because she doesn't have to make that decision, there's not really any kind of development with her, which, not a problem. This was a Rockhoof face episode, and kind of a Yona face episode, because Yona finally has someone she can look up to who is local. She's away from her Yak brother and Prince Rutherford, so she doesn't really have any role models in Ponyville besides the one that are presented. However, she is feeling a disconnect between these peaceful ponies, these peaceful, submissive, passive ponies, and her very cultural ties of like, Yak strong, Yak brave, but she has Rockhoof who pretty much demonstrates this, and I really want to see the relationship between Yona and Rockhoof kind of blossom. I want to see Rockhoof take Yona on as a kind of apprentice or maybe mentor her. Am I gonna see it? Probably not, because the series is kind of ending and there's not many episodes left that you can waste on something like that. However, maybe a little snippet in the future, I don't know, but it's definitely on my future episode wish list. I absolutely want to see these two characters interact again, because it was just a very heartwarming thing to see people, well, not people, creatures who are out of place in Equestria finally find their place. The previous episode, not the previous episode, but a few episodes ago, we had Gallus pretty much find his home in Equestria. Everyone else has pretty much found a home. I know Smolder has kind of made a friend in Spike. Gallus has finally accepted that people, well, not people, that creatures around him really do appreciate him and honor him. I mean, Ocellus is kind of trying to get out of her shell, but she's just naturally a very shy person, so I think maybe there would be a dynamic between her and Fluttershy. I'm not really sure, but anyway, overall thoughts on this episode: good episode, definitely worth a rewatch. I don't know if I'll be rewatching it recently like I do with episodes like Every Little Thing She Does and All Bottled Up, but I will definitely come back to this episode, and that's not something I can say with a lot of Season 8 episodes so far. Season 8 has been pretty mundane so far, but I'm glad to see the writers are kicking back into gear and getting back to it. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just fangirling a bit. Let me know what your thoughts on this episode are in the comments, and I will see you in the next rough draft. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I love you guys. Good night!